We're good. Okay.
So what is this?
So this
Failure
is
the
or
podcast.
Innovation Blab. Failure
Nobody
podcast.
likes that
This is
second
the
name.
B-side. This is the B-side.
Nobody likes that
Failure
second
the
name.
What
podcast.
episode?
82.
82.
I think you're right.
I think I am right.
You're right.
Something.
82.
We do this
Okay.
every time.
This is a fancy. This looks
Trying
like
to
a
remember.
1950s Chrysler or something
yeah.
like that.
Are you pointing at me or the mic?
You look like a.
You go well.
look like an
You go
Edsel.
well in the trunk.
Hey, we have a guest. Imran
Yes,
Nasrullah.
Nasrullah.
Can you introduce yourself? Because our guests, of course, are so well versed in this podcast.
You've listened to all 80.
Yeah.
They know
2
who we
episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
are. I'm joking, of course. We're not sure. Not our guests. I meant our audience. How much audience do we have?
12.
No. You think we have that many? 12? We have 12. Okay.
Sure.
Imran.
So yes, my name's Imran Nasrullah, and I was just recently I was the vice president and U.S. head of business development and licensing for Bayer Pharmaceuticals. I've been in.
How'd you end up here in this podcast?
We bumped into each other right here in the Venture Cafe.
And you had no better sense.
Is that the German aspirin company?
That's the German aspirin company.
Okay.
Yes, and surprisingly, for a global company, it's interesting how many people don't know Bayer.
Well, they because they think it's Bayer.
Yeah, not Bayer.
Bayer,
So
yeah.
that's like the German pronunciation. But I've been in biotech for 25 years in business development and licensing. I started my career after law school working for in technology transfer for the Mayo Clinic, and then later Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Went into industry and during the genomics era, worked for Millennium Pharmaceuticals on the BD&L side. And then after Genzyme, after Millennium, I went to Genzyme, and again within the BD&L capacity, but switched from therapeutics to molecular diagnostics, and looking for kind of novel platform technologies and new diagnostic methods and things like that.
Are we qualified to do this podcast? I don't think we are.
No, but we're in Kendall Square, which is really where he.
This is the
Yeah,
epicenter.
that's
all his
This is the
work.
epicenter
And
of
like
what we're
everybody
talking
has
about.
like the same.
Oh, so
impressive
you think we'll
backgrounds.
absorb it all?
Exactly.
We're
By
gonna-
osmosis. It's coming from that building over
Okay.
there.
Yeah.
So
Okay, we're not even going to know what that
That
is.
building's the library.
it's inductive charging.
Okay.
If you will.
Keep going.
But no,
Yo,
I spent 5 years in biotech.
You
before
did?
I was, yeah, at NERAC.
Where were you?
So I was at a research firm on the intellectual property side.
Yeah.
But a lot of my
NERAC.
clients, probably about a third of my clients, were in the
Remember
biotech
do know
space,
that.
right?
NERAC from the old
So,
days.
yeah, NERAC was
was a
your
big name.
grandfather's Google,
Yes.
right? And so it was in
Exactly.
1960s.
No, it was your grandfather's patents.google.com.
This is true. This
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
And so this is where your engineer grandfather would go for patent information and market research. They were part of the
Yes.
tech transfer
Yeah.
between the Apollo missions and private
What's scary
sector.
is when I
Very
started
cool.
practicing at my grandfather's age,
Yes.
I used NERAC.
Yeah, right.
Way back
All
in
right.
the
I just
like 60s,
I
wasn't it?
literally just got off the phone with my
idea.
former colleagues at NERAC, like Dr. Richard Hendricks and Dr. Ben Bahavar, and they're biotech patent experts.
I don't think we're qualified to be with him.
That's
But I was on the
true.
BD side of things, Emron, too.
Yeah.
So I was simply making the recipe for great projects. They were doing the projects. I was not a practitioner. I'm not a biotech expert, but I know how to speak like.
Why are we here?
Which is dangerous.
Look, I'm the least relevant person in the room.
So
That's always
I was the
true.
creative one. The engineer said, "You can't do that. No, you can't do that. You can't do
Okay,
that."
so-
Well, you might be able to do that.
Imran
Let's start
has
there.
actually only gone through half of his
I'm sorry.
bio. Keep
Yeah.
going.
Emron, keep going.
I'll make it very brief. So I
Nobody
was,
listens.
I was
Doesn't
also
matter.
the chief business officer for Mass Bio, which is a trade association.
yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So I was part of the team that brought Sanofi to Boston. We
No.
brought BMS to Devon's. And I-
What did you get for that?
These are
Startups.
Startups.
A lot of startups, yeah. I think, and I had a great experience. I worked for Bob Coughlin, who I've known for many years. We actually, his older brother, was my college floor mate and then later housemate. So I've known him since he was like 14.
wow.
And then went into
Let's get into
Big
those
Pharma.
stories, Emron.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can get into those. No, he's not here to defend himself. So.
we don't encourage people to prepare
Yeah.
for this podcast,
Yeah.
but you did prepare. And you had some
And I
thoughts.
cannot find my notes.
That's
so
easy.
Good.
I'm
Even better.
happy to
Even
go
better.
off the top
Okay,
of my
but
head.
just do it off the top of your head.
Sure.
You had some thoughts about failure.
Yeah. So like I've been in a lot of different kind of business models. I started off, like I said, in tech transfer. So I've been in like small companies medium-sized companies, big pharma, not-for-profit, for-profit, etc. And you just see a lot of instances where failure kind of creeps in, whether it's along the side of people, whether it's on the side of technology, whether it's on the side of risk and innovation. And so I kind of come to this whole...
Wait a minute. So we have mostly spoken in this podcast to startups or emerging companies.
Yeah.
Meaning they've got some funding.
Yeah.
And I would not say that failure is rare at all. It doesn't creep in, it dominates.
Yes.
Are you at the outset suggesting that in big pharma, failure is that much less common?
No. Big pharma
So
is
I just say
ripe for failure.
creep in.
Yeah.
Does it creep in like what is it? Is it helium that creeps into everything? In other words, does it get into? You said it creeps in.
Is it pervasive?
Like pervasive.
It's pervasive.
Pervasive.
Yeah.
Well, actually, on the shuttle, I don't think I've
Let me ask you a question.
Oh God.
It's inherent.
So this, I'm chomping at the bit. Once you said bear, I'm chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
So in some cases, I believe that not only is failure inherent and it's also baked in as it's going to happen, but it's planned for, right? So example with Bayer, right? So Bayer's a very large company, right? And they buy a lot of different things, and they're in a lot of different spaces, right? Bayer, sorry, excuse me, Bayer. So Bayer's in a lot of
We're
different
all
things.
sitting in Berlin right
And
now.
when Bayer
Blockchain.
makes an acquisition, I'm guessing, and they have never been a client. I don't know them that well, but I watch and I read the headlines, and I'm watching from the sidelines. And they bought a nuclear active company in Monsanto, right? They acquired Monsanto, knowing that they were going to have so many lawsuits as a result of that could be crippling, not just temporarily, but indefinitely, right? And they found out, right? They did the fuck around part, and they found out.
This podcast is only 45
Sorry,
minutes long.
but is that true? I mean, they know when you buy something like Monsanto, you're stepping in it and stomping in it almost, right?
Yeah. I'm not gonna.
You're not going to comment on that.
Come
That's
on.
fine.
Well, but I think the
want
failure
secrets.
thing is more. I'll just kind of skip over that.
Yeah, because he really didn't understand.
No,
much
I
of
understood
it.
every
He
single
understood-
You
word.
got where I was going with
He
that.
understood the step in it part.
Yeah.
No,
Okay,
but
got
how many drugs are researched versus how many actually make it out? That's kind of a basic, because that's
man.
failure baked in.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be like a funnel.
Yeah, totally.
Are you using
like
that
the
as a measure of
standard?
failure?
I'm using this just to do that sign so that when the three people that watch that see me doing something,
They know it's a
They'll-
funnel.
they'll wake
that's
up.
not a foul
Nice pivot.
gesture.
Nice
Oh,
pivot.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like kind of like the traditional numbers are like if you start at gene discovery, it's like a 1 in 10,000 chance that
1 in 10,000.
that what you will actually make it into the market, and then
So it's
along the way,
9,999 failures.
right?
No, no,
from
that's-
gene discovery.
wait, no.
See, this
From
blurb
gene
writes
discovery.
itself.
No.
9,999 failures.
Does AI help, Emran? Does that
I
reduce
think
to
it-
2 out of 1,000?
Yeah, it's interesting because
that
I
were the
think
case,
a
that'd be
lot
cool.
of big pharma hasn't really figured out how AI will help, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's like bits and pieces of it, but I think what everybody wants to see is like really a seamless kind of integration all the way from, let's say, discovery all the way to marketed products, and to have AI be informing all along the way, so that what you see in the market can relate back to gene discovery and the things that happen in gene discovery and translational medicine and clinical trials can be used.
Can I lasso this back in? We are actually.
It was in.
We were going somewhere. I thought yours was a fair question as a measure of failure.
Yeah.
You were asking
It's a
how
baseline.
many. Yeah, okay. You were asking
I liked
how
my
many
question.
how many drugs actually make the market from the number researched. Imran's response was that
1 out of 10,000.
But
From
yes,
gene discovery.
from gene discovery.
Yeah.
But I assume there are folks in the lab who are discovering genes and then throwing them away, if you will, before there's some high enough level meeting that the company as a whole says, okay, let's make this a product, or at least let's move this forward. So, in other words, the screening doesn't matter. Let's not count in that 10,000 the
Is
screening.
there a question in there?
Yeah, there is. What is it when you take at what point does Bayer, what is it, the pig and the chicken? At what point is Bayer You know the pig and the chicken?
No, I don't.
I was just watching Grey's Anatomy.
All right.
Well, the pig is the pig is committed. Are you?
Okay.
Are you?
No,
the
chicken and the egg.
The chicken. No, the pig and the chicken. The pig is, when you think about a breakfast, the pig is committed.
Okay.
Because the pig is being cooked up as, this is probably completely inappropriate, but being cooked up as bacon.
Yeah.
The chicken is just participatory because it's the egg.
It's giving eggs.
Giving
I
eggs.
think
Okay.
you mixed two analogies and none of them are working.
Okay. Okay, but in any case, at what point is Bayer committed to a product, and once Bayer is committed, what's the failure rate?
Yeah. So I'll just say
Wasn't
generally.
that a great question?
Generally not company related or company specific.
Yeah.
I won't pick on Bayer, but I'll just say as an industry perspective, if you start from lead optimization, right? So this is like you've identified the target that you want to go after. You found a molecule. You've now optimized the molecule, which could be the drug that makes it to the market. It's a 3% likelihood of success to the market, right?
Oh, that's better than 1 in 10,000.
1 in 10,000, right?
And what is the cost of getting to the, what did you call it, lead optimization? What's the cost of getting there? To that point?
So it's budget wise, I guess I'll throw out probably like $3 million to kind of get from gene discovery to like lead op.
And that's
like,
called general R&D.
That's general R&D, but general R&D goes all the way until you get to filing an IND, right? And then it becomes development. So research is everything up until, let's say, filing an IND with the FDA, and then development is everything from phase 1 through phase 3, and then commercials launch.
Okay, so from what you know, because Mark knows nothing.
Okay, that's okay.
That's so typical. So typical.
He's gentle, at least.
Not really.
Is IND a fair measure from your perspective?
Fair measure of what?
Fair measure of a
success or
starting
failure.
point for deciding whether there's success or failure. In other words, there's a certain amount of baseline research that needs to go on until some project director says, hey, we're coming out of the lab, we think we got something, it's now time to ramp up from off the R&D budget onto a project budget. Is that...
Yeah, I mean, I don't look at IND as that kind of measure. I look at it as there's a million ways to die. If you're looking for this
fair mouse,
right? There's a if you're a new project or a new pursuit, or they're looking to solve an unmet need, and hey, we're gonna dedicate everything we've got to this. We're gonna put $1 billion in this. There's a million ways to die before that thing gets to market. And I think that's the way I look at it. It's a lawsuit, it's a IP failure, it's whatever it is, right? It's unmet clinical endpoint, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's so many things that can go wrong. I think you got to choose a spot much further down the road once you get to some proof or something that says, all right, now the game starts, right? Because this is all pre-gaming it. Mm-hmm. And then once the game starts, then you're talking about
so what do you...
So I think
wait a minute. How is this any different than what a venture capital firm does at a very high level?
You mean in terms of measuring?
Well, there's got to be
they spread their bets out.
Yeah,
I'm going to bet on 100 things, and out of 100, it's a stage gate thing.
And that's fair.
40 of them,
and that's kind of the way that I look at it.
Yeah, and then you start winnowing it down until you've got the one Google or the one whatever.
Drawing on that 5 years at NIRAC, there was so early in the process of discovery where there was a biosequence search or something that we were doing that was to find a candidate to get to that candidate, right?
Yeah.
And then you give them an at bat. Unless they're at bat, right? That process hasn't started.
Okay,
yet.
that's fair.
my point.
So that's fair. So how would you translate to that to your the stages at in a typical pharmaceutical company like Bayer?
So so the biggest area of
or
failure,
some other non-German one.
Yeah.
Not any pharma company. The biggest point of failure is really kind of in that area called translational medicine, right? So you go from cell lines to mice, right? And you'll kind of move up the phylogenetic scale, maybe go into dogs or something.
Poor puppies.
But it's that transition from an animal model to a person where most of the failure happens, right?
And what's the failure rate there?
So if you're at let's say late preclinical and you're trying to get, late preclinical is probably about a 10% likelihood of success.
That's pretty good.
That's what I was saying. So once it hits your website, once it hits the company's public-facing website and says this is one of our candidates, that's when we're talking. We're playing ball. It's no longer spring training. We're in the season.
File the IND.
We're looking at it. They've already invested in it. There's a bunch of stuff that's been done, but now it's on the team.
When does it? Okay, so consistent with that, when does it show up in a project budget versus a general R&D budget?
Oh, way earlier.
Project
budget is discovery. So that early stuff. But I mean, that's where your cap comes in. It's like looking at a baseball team. It's like, what are we going to spend this year? What are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to win a World Series? Or are we trying to get to the pennant?
Do you follow any of this?
What is the? I'm using baseball analogies to make this simple for
Mark
you guys.
doesn't know what baseball is.
All right, but we're going to spend a bunch of money, and then we're going to develop some candidates out of that money that we spent, right? That's our team. That's our starting.
So the answer to my original question, not my original, but my
You
most
had a
recent
question?
was something like, yes, it's like a venture capital firm.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to spread some
It's
money.
a portfolio
Yeah.
of
Okay.
opportunities.
And
that
if you're the
looking at.
larger company, so use the big company buying this other company and the nightmares, it's one venture firm buying someone else's portfolio.
Where are we
Buying a
going?
baseball team, right? We're buying a team that's already developed. They've got 10 candidates. One of them is going to
when
make
you go
it.
down a baseball
No
team.
baseball? Come on, this is Boston, man. They're not going to go.
Where were you going
I do
with
work with the Red Sox, and I still don't know anything about baseball.
Well, hold on.
Which is true.
It's like my children. They've got no interest in baseball.
Guys.
Okay. All right.
Where were you? You had a thought about failure.
Stick with
Does this
failure.
remind you of anything?
Let's let the guests talk about
Oh,
something.
I mean, it's just kind of tying it all in,
There we
like
go. We
with.
got it.
He liked my question the best.
Oh, he did not.
Well,
He
with
did
the
not.
venture capital.
cringy.
and-
Did you guys
and Big
apologize ahead of
Pharma.
time to Imran?
Oh no,
No, we need
All
to
right,
talk.
good.
This is
He
gonna
figured
be
it
a
out.
conversation.
He figured it out.
He
He
knew
looked at
that.
that. He looked at that great slide. He's like, "This is bad."
Yeah, half of it is. The bottom half.
I'm really kind of enamored with this idea of the hype cycle curve.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Right.
don't credit him.
Don't.
Thank you.
It just goes to his head.
This whole thing will be about him.
No.
then.
It'll be all about Jeff.
But
It's all about Jeff.
I'm gonna reflect it onto David after this. But go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I mean, if you tie in venture capital and big pharma together, right? I mean, there's this idea of the hype cycle curve where, new innovative ideas, they gather a lot of momentum and steam. The value of it goes up because, a lot of high science has gone into it. You have the venture capitalists that are really kind of spinning up the value of the story. They're getting other investors to kind of pile in.
For the theory of the greater fool.
Yes, I think it's a lot of following.
You know the greater fool theory.
Yeah, of course.
There's
So,
always- yeah.
but let's talk about a
He was
specific
on
example,
track.
right? So gene therapy, right,
Yeah.
and CAR T and all these things we've been hearing about for the last 5 to 10 years, right? The hype cycle was nonstop.
Yeah.
You mentioned CAR T. Give me my checkbook. I'm going to write you a check for it, right?
Right.
But where
CAR
we
T.
ended, what's that?
CAR T.
Yeah, here you go. So, but where we end up is now
Yeah.
it's imploded. It's
Right.
imploded because the payers said we're not paying for this shit.
Right.
Like if it works, we're going to pay $1 million. If it doesn't work, we're not paying anything. Okay, we kind of like that, but how often is this going to work? And then boom, all of a sudden it's working all over the place, and it just implodes. It's like a black hole. It got too big and it collapsed.
Okay.
So now they're laying off all their scientists.
Right.
Right. In my neighborhood, I've having conversations of all these scientists that are now jobless.
Yeah.
Because they
Jeff
said,
Lawson.
"Where's everything going?"
Yeah.
CAR T. All right, I'm going to go spend $100,000 or $500,000 investing to get an education CAR T,
Yeah.
and boom, now I'm out of a job.
You're out of
Can we get back on
Is that a
track?
failure? Is that a failure of
Hold
the hype
it.
cycle?
Hold it.
So I think the whole hype cycle is really a model in failure.
We've lost control.
We
We
have
can leave
lost-
the room. We'll be back in about 20 minutes.
Yeah, tell us when
Does
we
that-
get
does
back
that
on
make
track.
sense?
It makes sense. And,
So
and
where were you before Jeff so rudely interrupted?
tracking along.
Don't tell
where
us
he
a good
is.
question.
We're having a
Bad
conversation.
idea.
This is he's spot
Bad
on, right?
idea.
Because what happens is that once you crest the hype cycle,
Yeah.
it's a crash, right?
Yep.
And then the goal, I think, really is for the VC is to sell it off to big pharma, who then takes on all the risk, right, to try to debug the technology, so to speak.
What's the likelihood of that happening?
I mean, it depends
And at
on
what
how hot
price?
the science is, right?
Right. And
Well,
CAR
wait a
T
minute.
was super hot.
Right.
Stellar.
And-
But you're telling me it crashed.
It did because it was successful. So all of a sudden, all
how
these
confusing.
Yeah, all these stars. So this is what the scenario is. Let's say you've got a rare disease, right? And they develop a technology that's going to fix your rare disease, and it's not going to be something that's treatable. It's going to cure you, David. So you had a disease that was crippling, and I give you one gene therapy treatment.
Magic
it
bullet.
fixes you. It's magic. The insurance company's now on the hook to pay $1 million for your treatment. Okay?
Right.
And they say, well, that's rare. It's not going to happen every day.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, Mark comes to the door and says, hey, I've got the same thing that David had, and boom, he gets cured. Next thing you know, you got insurance companies that are going under because they're on the hook for this $1 million payment. They thought they'd have to make 4 or 5 times a year.
But wouldn't it? Well,
So
here's
it's
my,
a
here's
victory.
my dumb
And there are
question.
like 30,000 rare diseases.
Yeah.
I got that, but how
so-
often is there a CAR T or other solution that is, or technology that has proven so effective?
This is where the whole industry got flipped on its
CRISPR.
head. Yeah, because CRISPR now is being able to solve all these problems, and they're saying, I can cure that, and I can cure that, and I can cure that, and I can cure that.
Yeah.
And the industry's going, whoa, we don't want to cure this stuff. We want to put you on a regimented, medication you're going to take for the next 20 to 30 years, this doesn't fit in our business.
All right, so here's my
a
question.
minute.
Isn't it cheaper ultimately to pay the $1 million and apply the magic bullet?
If they were going to stick with the same payer for the course of their life.
Right.
Or if
And
you're
then-
in a socialized medicine where curing people is actually the goal.
Well, that's
not the industry.
Wait a
we
minute,
live
this
in.
sounds like a MAGA conspiracy
No, it's
theory.
not a conspiracy theory, and I'm not MAGA. I'm here to tell you that the industry is not motivated by curing you. This is like Eddie Murphy
I
or
get
Chris
that.
Rock.
I'll say the insurance
money is
company's
in the
not
treatment.
motivated. I'll
No.
say the insurance company's not motivated.
Wait
treating
a
you.
minute.
Because
Right.
You'd think
It's
the
wild,
net present
right?
value of a patient
I want to hear
cured
that from
is
Imran.
So when I used to work
Explain the
for
economics.
Genzyme Genetics, right? So we were in molecular diagnostic testing, right? We wanted to develop companion diagnostics to therapeutics. Right?
Okay.
The problem, of course, was that when we went to the insurance companies to talk to them, they basically look at 5-year survival curves, right, for cancer, right?
Okay.
And so if you make the economic argument
Right.
that, listen, by diagnosing and having a therapy, over the lifetime of that patient, you're going to save tenfold
Right.
than the cost of treating up front. The argument back from the insurance company is that, well, most people stay on insurance for 3 years and then they're on to another plan. Why should we pay
For the win.
for the win? Exactly. And
But-
so
But so there's not like a pool, an insurance pool, which is not
Nope.
quite socialized medicine, but
Should we move to Canada?
well,
but you're right though. I mean, it's like even
there's
for
like
these,
a car insurance pool. That's where I'm getting this.
Well,
thought.
this is where coupling employment and insurance is just the wrong model because
Right.
it causes disincentive to actually solve a problem.
right. So if you're with your employer for 20 years, great.
Yeah.
But your employer
That's not-
has to be persistent with Blue
I am
Cross.
That's not the norm.
I'm going to naively assert you're telling me that there are all these solutions to terrible diseases out there, and but for the insurance companies, they would be readily available.
He's
to
been
us.
listening. He was listening.
I was listening. I was skeptical. This does sound MAGA-esque.
yes, I have been
We're
at
going to have to call
conferences.
J.D. Vance and ask him what he would do.
I've been at conferences where there will be a representative from Blue Cross Blue Shield from the innovation side, and point blank, they will just say exactly the argument that I have, which is that employees of companies only stay on insurance for a certain number of years, and then they're off to the next. The models that they have are all based on the fact that there are 5-year survival.
Well, how
curves
much of a
and
secret?
people aren't
Okay,
gonna
but
stay
how
on
much of
it.
a secret is this? Is this being revealed for the first time ever on this podcast?
No.
Oh, I think if you
We're not but we're not bearing the lead. This is something that it's known.
Yeah.
It's known throughout the industry.
Not to our
and
listeners.
when we as product developers, so I've been in product development now for 18 years.
Yeah.
And in product development, what is the first step? You talk to the stakeholders and you find out what are the stakeholders' value propositions they're trying to solve for. Because if you don't, and if you find competing value propositions like we're going to cure a disease, don't cure a disease, we want therapies that treat, you're going to find that product is not going to go to market.
Okay,
it's
hold
going
on.
to fail. It's going to fail.
Hold on.
And so, hold on, wait, let me finish the thought. So if it's going to fail, we're not
J.D.
even going
Vance right now.
We're not even going to start it.
Hey, J.D.
But if we find something that is a CAR T therapy that takes maybe 20 doses, and you have to do that over the course of the 5 years, they'll sign on for that because they're the ones that are going to benefit. They're going to solve the problem. They'll pay for it. But if it's curative,
Wait
done,
a minute.
right
wait,
there.
Hold on.
Yep.
Go back to my more simplistic question. It sounds like there are many solutions out there that are not being funded because of the economic model in this country.
100,000% true.
Okay.
And you're telling me that this podcast is not the first time that's being revealed.
No.
So why doesn't? Okay.
Why is it not public knowledge?
Why have we not heard about it in, for example, the Cambridge town meeting or whatever they have
Because-
here? Or why haven't we heard of it in
Cambridge is a city.
Massachusetts?
It's not discussed in
Whatever it
polite
is.
company.
Why
Period.
not in Congress? Hasn't somebody said?
Forget about Congress.
You can talk to any of the scientists that are being laid off for investing their life savings in CAR T, and they'll tell you exactly what the deal is. We don't want to solve problems. We want to suspend
You
the
have to
treatment.
admit this does sound MAGA-esque.
It does. And until about a year ago...
So should I change my vote?
No, until about a year ago, I had a very different view of what this looks like. But the evidence that's coming out shows me that, the conspiracy was correct.
No.
Okay, I'm going to
No.
come across less conspiratorial.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I
Yes,
think
thank
that's-
you.
Yes, I think it's much
Because
more
our one listener
about
Dave's
is very
clinging on to
skeptical.
his
his
beliefs.
I want to think
the
this
silhouette
work
of
the way they're
reality.
supposed to.
Okay, so all technologies bear different risks, right? And then the financing of those technologies and those different risks has to be specific to that, right? So it's not a one size shoe fits all, right? So you can't say, NK cells, CAR T cells, CRISPR-based technologies, small molecules. They all have their own inherent risks, right? And so the financing of that has to accommodate the type of risk. So I know, in the past, the professor over at MIT, Andy Lowe, has talked about
he was on our podcast last week.
Yeah. So using bonds as a way to raise revenues to pay for cancer.
He did not.
Which is a model that works well for cancer. It might not work well for infectious disease, right?
Wait a minute. I just want to rehear that.
Which is
I distracted him.
A municipal or some other bond, not a municipal.
Yeah, to say I'm a stakeholder. I want this to be solved. I want a cure for this. Let's take an example.
That goes to my insurance pool question.
Yeah, let's take an example that has not been solved yet, right?
Twice.
If we went out and started a company right now, Imran, that was focused on solving celiac disease, right? And we said, I'm going to get in touch with every person who has celiac or has a risk of celiac and ask them for $10. And those families bond in for $10. That's going to be more successful than going to private capital or going to a payer and saying, hey, if we develop a model where you can actually cure these people of... that's going to work. So
why not do a GoFundMe then?
You could. You literally could.
Wait a minute. A basic test of this. If this conspiracy is true, or the economic model...
It's not a conspiracy. These are factual...
It's just the way that...
You're asking for expertise.
It's Adam Smith. It's really Adam Smith.
Okay.
It's the invisible hand of economics. Why then don't we see more drug development for these diseases in either Canada or in the UK or any other... nationalized health system, because they've got an ongoing stake in the health of their populace. What a great question.
So everybody asks us, why do we pay more for drugs in Canada, right?
That's the flip side of that.
And I mean, it's a long and complex answer, but I would just basically say that in the big picture, we want to have the latest and greatest drugs, right? So we want innovative drugs, but we want laggard prices, right? But it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. I mean, if you want to have the latest and greatest, you got to pay for it. I mean, technology costs money.
Okay, so your point.
Science is, I'll say this, science equals money, right? The more money you have, the better science you can do, the less risk you can try to take out of the equation.
Wait a minute, so how does that...
Because infrastructure's already been invested right here. So right there... Companies have already invested their infrastructure, so they're going to take all their R&D spending and they're going to put it right here where they can write it off, right? And it's basically the lag time between what's happening right now, and then eventually it'll get democratized. It'll go up to Montreal. It'll go to Toronto.
So that's actually the point I was going to make, which is the Canadians sort of they're drafting alongside of us. They're benefiting without investing. But as a result, also their cost
innovation comes really. I won't say no innovation, but little relative to Cambridge, right? Little innovation comes out of Canada.
Okay,
how about the UK?
Even if you start a company,
2%, 3%.
How about the UK?
Well, so that's a government-funded program, right? And even the UK, when you look at innovation, there's not a lot of venture capital out there, right? So you don't see the level of startups that you see here
because they're coming to Cambridge to get.
But wait a minute, hold on. I feel like we're off track. I thought the question was there are a bunch of people out there who have diseases, and the NHS, the National Health System in the UK, has to pay for them.
Right.
So they should be motivated to pay for these CAR T therapies or these CRISPR therapies, because it would save them money in the long run. And yet you seem to be suggesting they are not,
because they're also in the red right now. So think about Regeneron. So Regeneron is a great example of this, right? So Regeneron spent for 20 years just spending. They dug themselves such a hole. And they shot up out of the hole, right? And they got this technology that just got us through a pandemic. We would not have got through it without it. But there was a lot of deficit they had to overcome. Yeah. So if the UK and Canada and all these other places want to take the benefit of that CAR T, you're still paying $1 million a dose at this point. That's just the reality of it. It's super expensive that they developed it.
This thing,
and they will rationalize their payments.
Okay, but if I went to Canada, it ain't cheaper. No, is what you're saying for this specific...
No, because
the government negotiates pricing in Canada. We don't. Which is what the whole Inflation Reduction Act is.
If the government wanted to buy back all of the debt from the research, if they wanted to say, you know what, we'll wipe your books clean on this because we have a population of X that's going to do this, we'll give you the $20 billion that you spent to develop this. Yeah. Great. Now the government can give it away free, willy-nilly, and solve everybody.
NHS, for example, is not motivated because they don't have the money to pay for the solutions that are potentially out there and almost surely out there.
They'd be paying for $20
taxpayer
worth of
funded,
R&D.
right?
Yeah.
It's like taxpayer funded. So there's only a certain pool of money that they have that they can draw from. Right?
They can pick one disease every 5 years and afford it.
Okay, so you really do need a capitalist model that we have here and a third-party payer
I would say
model.
that in that capitalist model, you need to have many options of financing, not just the traditional, kind of you go down the VC route and you try to raise money and then it's kind of like this progression.
Okay, so
But
why
if you can
didn't
pay out of pocket, you can solve anything right now. I mean, if you're going to pay $1 million a dose for this, you can get rid of your non-Hodgkin's lymphoma or whatever it is, right?
So if that's the case, let me that's an interesting thought. So I've had a number of friends who have had reasonably large exits over the years.
Yeah.
One of them was sick, actually no longer with us.
Sure.
But I contended that based on his ability to write it,
a second exit.
He could live.
he could. I would contend that he was able to, use his checkbook to elongate his
100%. And there's centimillionaires and billionaires right now who are tapping into this and saying, I'm going to live an extra 50 years because I can afford to.
That's a different thing. That's the Kurzweils and all those guys that are...
You're talking vampire theory at that point, right? But the interesting part about this, though, is the failure is not the failure of the technology. The failure is not the failure of the science. The failure is not the failure of the scientists. The failure is a assumption or presumption that the business model is already figured out. Right. And that everybody was in agreement that this is what we're going to do, and it's not. And that's where the failure was. It's in...
He used the word failure about 16 times.
And I would
charge him a royalty.
So the best metaphor...
Dave is so pissed. He's like, why is this conspiracy correct? Like his brain... No. And mine was about to implode. When I talked to this scientist this weekend at the pool in our neighborhood, his name is Kyle. Great guy.
Kyle
Mills.
Kyle has now lost his job.
No, he hasn't. He was already unemployed. He was a CAR T scientist, senior scientist, doing this work.
That's going to be in the footnotes.
Studied at Berkeley. Yeah. But this is the failure, is somebody up the line said, hey, if we fix this thing and you only have to pay $1 million, like, I don't know, 5 times a year, would you do it? They're like, hell yeah, I'll sign up for that every day.
Going back to the economic model, would if the legislature could get their act together at the federal level, and they instituted insurance pools so that, for example, you paid for all of your subscribers now 100%, but then for the lingering or the lagging 4 years after they go to the next insurance company, you pay 30%. So maybe really they're paying 70% than 30%. Would that solve this? Is that only one piece of the problem?
So that was talked about in the past, and maybe it was
good question, Dave.
Yeah, maybe it came up during the time of the ACA.
I kind of nodded off.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, people have talked about this kind of model in the past,
and
I mean, whether it gets adopted is a different issue, right? I mean, Obama.
But would it solve? Is that the fundamental underlying economic problem?
That is it is one of the big problems.
Is it? It's not a question of. It's really the insurance companies are.
It's really the insurance companies.
Oh, good. We have somebody to get angry.
We
at
do.
us.
We definitely do. But they got to be in business.
Should we tell Kamala Harris that she should attack the insurance companies?
Go after the insurance companies.
Yeah.
I mean, Obama.
Bernie's been talking about that for years.
Bernie.
For years.
He's old though. He's old.
2 weeks ago.
He's old.
Okay. But he's already been saying that for 10 years. Here's the point.
Conspiracy.
Yeah. So China 2 weeks ago announced that they had already solved diabetes with CRISPR. And they have.
Really?
They've solved diabetes. They also solved asthma in the same week. They were like, we solved asthma and diabetes. And the whole world said nothing.
No.
It's the same technology. It's CAR T, it's CRISPR, it's all these things that are curative. The world does not want a curative solution. They want you fat and sick and dumb and on insulin for the rest of your life. That's what they want.
Well, that covers Mark, but how about the rest of us?
Not on insulin.
Maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to wade into
super cynical.
That's fine.
I don't. But I will say
prove me
this.
wrong, though.
Okay, I just want to get this out, right? So, from an innovation policy, right? The problem, the inconsistency is that you have, let's say, for example, the federal government on the one side that says, I'm going to open the spigot on innovation and I'm going to do the cancer moonshot, right? All this money
there we go.
Right? So you open the faucet hose.
What's his name? The Trump son-in-law.
Whoever it is.
Jared.
Yeah. So you open the spigot and you say innovation, will flow and we're going to fund it.
Yeah.
On the other end of this garden hose, you then stick a cork on the back end, which is all the austerity measures around who pays for it, right? And so because...
Wait a minute, pays for what?
New innovative drugs.
No, but you already said the government's funding it.
For the innovation front end of the...
Well, we'll have them, let's double the size of the spigot and have them pay for everything up to $35 is it a week or a pill?
That's
or a
fine.
bottle
You can have an unlimited open spigot, right?
Yeah.
But if you stick a cork in the back end and say we're not going to pay it, right?
Well, they're going to pay $35.
Like the Inflation Reduction Act says that we're not going to pay for these original 10 molecules because the drug companies are getting too rich. The problem is that now innovation doesn't flow.
No, wait a minute.
Right?
But I don't get that. If you pay enough with your moonshot program to not only fund development, fund the failures, and fund all the studies, so that you can now deliver the product at market rates.
You're putting 20 years of separation between the two in that statement, right? Because what's happening is that at the front end of this, research at the NIH, research at the universities, it's funded by public dollars, right? That is opening the spigot on innovation.
So you're saying it's a 20-year timetable, and we have senators who are 6 years, presidents at 4 to 8 years, depending.
Yeah, I mean,
and that's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that
trivial.
A drug is, I mean, it takes on average, 10 to 15 years for a drug to come into the market, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, you say, you know what, we're not going to reimburse you for it because it's too expensive or whatever the reason is. Too many patients, we can't afford it. What the government, if it puts in these kind of austerity measures in place, like the Inflation Reduction Act, right, then all you're doing is you're sticking a cork in that innovation pipeline. Because you're not going to pay for it.
Okay, hold on. I have to ask.
And this is the problem.
Jeff,
that
are you discovering anything useful on your computer, or are you like,
yeah?
What'd you learn?
I'm finding the diabetes thing, because my point was, after Imran was done making his point, it's why was the media not covering that China defeated asthma and diabetes in the same week?
Because it's China.
No, but that's
China.
You don't want to admit that somebody else beat you in innovation.
I get that,
right?
but that would be the call to action to say, well, what are we doing about it?
Since
why
I have
can't we
asthma,
have
it should be like the space race.
It should be like that, right?
It should be like the space race.
And if it's a moon spot, then we have to actually be ambitious. But to be defeated at the end, not by solving the problem, but by agreeing on who's paying for it.
Wait a minute. Is China making these available to, say, Elon Musk? If Elon Musk had diabetes and whatever else he said, could he send to China $1 million a week for his one pill a week or whatever?
But it's not a one pill a week. It's a one treatment.
Oh.
It's a one treatment.
Well, how much would he have to pay for
So what they could do is they could say, you know what, we're going to set up medical tourism, and all you need is a flight to Beijing,
right.
So what
and,
is China?
and a check for $1,000, and we'll cure your diabetes.
I
would do that.
I would do it.
Why then? So that China has a very different system in many ways. Why then are you telling me they've solved the problem that is diabetes?
Curative.
They've cured diabeties. Yeah. So why isn't it on the market right now? And why don't we have?
First of all, he's saying it's
just solving it and commercializing it and making it medically available for people are different things.
So where are
solving
they from?
it is
but they have a completely different. How are they going to bring it?
They've
to market?
got a baseball team that's ready to play ball, right? Yeah. And they're bringing it to market, so they're ready for the first.
They're going to.
Yeah, absolutely, they're going to.
So they're going to corner the market.
And they're going to not have any diabetes in China.
They're going to corner the
market.
market.
We're going to have diabetes here.
And then all these diabetes providing companies, wherever they are going to be gone. Or we'll ask for licensing deals.
No, we're still going to be on the same model.
That's an interesting point. Right.
That's the
rare,
fourth.
Very rare.
Yeah.
Very
so there was a great.
Keeping track.
What is that about?
It was an editorial or an article in the
Wall
Wall Street Journal, right? And they were saying that you go back, 50, 70 years back, right? Europe was kind of at the forefront of pharmaceutical sciences, right? And then what happens is that Europe starts to put in place these austerity measures because their economy can't kind of keep up with the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
So then what ends up happening is that all of that innovation that's going on in the pharmaceutical sciences comes to the U.S., right? It happens to dovetail with the rise of biotech that's going on here, right? So now you have all the innovation that was in Europe kind of coming to the U.S., because the dollars are also flowing out of Europe, and the dollars are now
except
here
for the
in
Ozempic dollars.
That's a new thing, right? But now you have in the last 50 years, you have biotech, kind of the golden age of biotech, plus all the pharmaceutical sciences, plus all the capital that's here, right? Now what we're doing on our side is we are now saying that we're not going to pay for all of these expensive drugs, and we're putting austerity measures here, right? So then you have to ask the question, where does that innovation go? Up until very recently, it's all going to China.
This is so depressing.
Right? Because all the capital flows were going to China.
Right.
China, last couple of years, its economy has slowed down rapidly, right? So now the question is, who picks up this innovation slack? Because innovation is going to follow the dollars, right? Wherever that's going. So the question is, in the global market, where is the cash going that is going?
So what's the next spot?
I don't know, but that's
innovation
kind of the
tourism,
trend.
not it is medical tourism.
But it could be medical tourism, right? I think that the Chinese economy could pick up pretty quick if you were just taking flights to Shanghai. Shanghai hospital cured a 59-year-old of type 2 diabetes. Said, we're going to transplant islet cells into that patient, right? So they take a failed pancreas, they harvest a few islet cells, they grow and expand them, and they stick them to the liver. And now the liver makes your it basically acts as a pancreas and delivers your insulin. And that's it. Done. You're done. Sweet. Right?
Yeah.
So,
sweet, said Kyle.
And then there's all these other things, right? Like, but here's the question, though, is that at what point do these scientists that are getting fired for CAR T come and tell everybody, don't go to school for science. This is the game is fixed. Like he is this scientist is upset because he feels like he was duped. Like he got in for the right reasons. I want to help humanity. I want to find a cure. CAR T is how we can do it. We're going to cure disease. And then you get to the finish line, and his lab is curing stuff.
Yeah.
And now he's out of a job because he did his job.
He did his job too well.
He did his job too well.
I must say, I find this very disturbing.
I find it disturbing as well.
Okay, so we need a solution, because this is where the solutions happen.
The solution has to be
different
economic.
Models,
It has to be financial. It has to be angel investors that are getting involved early that change a model, right? That start financing larger deals. It could be a conglomerate of angel investors around the U.S. that say, you know what, we're going to take a different model. We're not even going to get VCs involved or strategics or otherwise, and we're going to create a model that makes sense for these particular types of therapies.
So that would be actually, I can imagine, there's a big, I'm not going to name them, but a big venture firm here with the word flag in it that would probably be really good at creating sort of an offshoot that created that sort of thing.
Yeah, we need financial innovation.
Yeah, and I think
because they I think benefited from the Moderna thing because they would
made a lot of money off that.
Yeah,
and believe me, there's companies,
but it's governments that pay.
Yeah,
right? Governments and insurance companies that pay.
Well, there's another solution to this, to create a competitive system where I guess we're moving toward, whether we use AI or CAR T or whatever technology we use, we're now able to not simply we don't simply have palliative treatment. We don't simply have symptom treatment. We can get rid of the disease. Mm-hmm. Should we instead set up a new system, because we now can cure problems?
Yep.
Should we pay half the drug companies to create diseases and another half to cure them?
David, here's my argument.
You sound like Bill Maher.
No. Here's the thing. And I've watched a lot of Bill Maher.
He's crazy.
But this is where I was going with my original questioning, right?
Oh.
And if there's one company,
you had a point.
Yes, I had a very big point, and you deflected and but my point is this:
doing my best.
Is that what you just said is not far from the truth?
Oh.
And if you want to feel really jaded, there's companies that in their portfolio have both the disease and the solution, right?
Yeah.
So if you're selling glyphosate in volumes and using it off-label and doubling your usage and doubling the quantity in the market, because you got to grow your market share every quarter, or you're not going to survive. And then you also buy a company that has the solution for the number one symptom of glyphosate exposure, being metabolic disorder. And you're solving metabolic disorder, and you're creating metabolic disorder.
Okay, so that
exists today.
Bullets and sutures.
Yeah,
and I don't want to point fingers to certain companies, but I need an answer for that.
Okay, here we go.
Right, so
we happen to have the right guess.
I don't want to speak about Bayer.
That's fine. That's fine.
Right, but I will.
But he knew what I was talking about.
But if you want to address the underlying issue, let's say cardiometabolic disease, right?
Yep.
Then stop selling fast food. Stop selling sugary drinks. Stop
everything
selling
should be legal.
And if you look at like what Mayor Bloomberg tried to do a few years back by putting a tax on like these like colas,
big gulps.
Yeah, then like you had the you had like the conservative side of politics basically jumping down his throat saying that this is Big Brother. It's like it's like people
I feel like
aren't
you changed gears with that. Wait a minute. I had a very simple model.
Yeah.
The simple model was that now instead of making people feel better, so you can sell them a pill a day, a pill a week, whatever it is.
It has nothing to do with the pharma industry. It has everything to do with the lifestyle that you choose. I used to sit on Governor Patrick's. I used to sit on Governor Patrick's Healthcare Cost and Quality Council, right?
Oh. Yep.
And I used
What's
to.
he doing these days, by the way?
I think he's at Big Capital, I think.
Oh, he is.
But I remember going to UMass Medical, and every year they kind of do this kind of like state of the hospital type of thing, right? And there was a physician who said that, look, notwithstanding all the great drugs that the industry comes up with, right? If you could just get people to eat right, exercise, and do all the lifestyle things that need to be done, right, you could reduce hospital admissions, readmissions, you could reduce emergency care, you could reduce all the things that are driving healthcare costs up. Nobody does it. So it has nothing to do with the pharma company making people sick. It's just what lifestyle.
No, not the pharma company. The agricultural company.
No, but I feel
but hold on.
You're going back to Monsanto.
But I do.
Seeds.
No, but this is the point. Is that the seeds that they sell are only grow when they are used with the same weed killer.
Right.
And then these farmers that sign up for these seeds can't switch seeds. They can't switch crops. They can't do anything. They're stuck for life growing Monsanto seed. Period. Right. And they also have to use glyphosate. And then they're told to use glyphosate on desiccation after the crop is done to increase the bounty of that crop, off-label use, again, and the use of glyphosate over the course of the last 30 years has gone up and up and up and
that
up.
And
that causes metabolic disorder. So even if I eat well, even if I exercise 5 times a week, if I do all those things, it's still causing metabolic disorder, immune dysfunction, immune diseason immunodeficiency diseases.
So it sounds perfect.
And it's the perfect storm. But it doesn't matter if I eat clean. I have to eat all organic, non-GMO, but the damage has been done. Because for the 30 years, I wasn't aware that I was being poisoned, and now I have a disease.
Can we go back to China?
But wait, that's the point. The point is, everybody is trying their best to stay healthy, and the places where metabolic disorder does not exist like this are the places where glyphosate is banned. Places like Europe, places that don't spray this on their crops are banned.
Or where there are non-Western diets.
Or there are non-Western diets,
which
is Western diets inherently. Let's say the same product from the same company,
you can get a word in edgewise.
like gummy bears.
Right.
Really simple. Haribo gummy bears. When you go to Europe and you buy Haribo gummy bears, they're made of sugar. There's no glyphosate traces in them. When you buy them here, they're made of corn syrup. Corn, sugar, wheat, oat.
Yes.
We are back. Hold on. So where were we?
So I was on a rant.
Yeah.
And Imran was just explaining that when we also transfer our SAD diet, our standard American diet, to other non-Western cultures, that they suffer the same metabolic disease that we do, right?
Yeah.
But there's something inherent. It's not just because we're eating cheeseburgers. It's not just because we're eating French fries. It's because all of those things that go into make up a hamburger or French fries are processed, are chemically ridden.
Question. Good. If the Chinese cure works for diabetes,
Right.
what would happen to the average American who loves fast food, who is now diabetic, now takes a trip to Beijing, Shanghai, and gets his treatment? And he or she then comes back here and dives back into fast food. Would they then just have to take a sort of every 5 years, take that little trip to Shanghai and get another pill?
The insulin resistance or the pancreatic cells that die probably would quit again, right? I don't know.
I don't know. But I also think that you also have to try to figure out what are the population-specific indications. So like diabetes in China, I don't know, the answer for sure, but like when you look at population-specific geographies, right, you might find that what works in one country may not work in another country, or it works to a lesser degree because the genetics is different, lifestyle is different, everything's different. So just because something works in China may not mean that it'll work here in the U.S. population.
I feel like this discussion was getting. I thought it was not that it's not an interesting discussion, but I feel like when we start diving into glyphosates and fast food and everything, we're changing directions, because I thought what I was trying to get my handle on is a fundamental flaw. Well, not a flaw. It's just an outcome of the economic system we have, which is because the relatively short-sightedness of the insurance companies is problematic, and I thought there might be a solution in that. The next thing I knew, we were talking about glyphosate.
Well, I think it's a system, right? So if you have a system that does not want you necessarily to be cured, or does not necessarily want you to be healthy because you're not part of their market if you're healthy, then you're not going to have things like you're not going to have things like universal health care, which covers things like curative disease.
But wait a minute, that's a negative way to look at it. The flip side of it is that you're asking the insurance companies to pay an awful lot, or the venture capitalists or the drug companies to pay an awful lot that they're not going to be able to recoup.
Yeah.
And I think so. I don't know. You have to attack anything else.
Let's talk about what the insurance companies are.
Yeah.
The insurance companies are a middleman that process payments. Period.
Yeah.
They're a middleman that process payments. We pay more than enough to cover the care of everybody in this country. Yeah. And if we eliminated just that middleman, we would save trillions of dollars in care per year to keep America safe. If you wanted that, and that was the motive, then the FDA would be much more critical of disease-causing carcinogens and metabolic disorder-inducing agricultural chemicals. No, it's not. And if those two things were eliminated, get rid of insurance companies, get rid of poisons in our food, America's safe, clean, and happy.
That's what happens to the whole state of Connecticut. I mean,
right? Well, insurance migrated out of Connecticut a long time ago.
But aren't insurance companies fundamentally useful?
Useless.
No, they're not useless.
How so?
Who's going to handle the processing of payments? Do you want the government to do that? I don't trust the government.
The government does it in every other civilized nation. Why not?
But apparently we do much better here. We just were hearing a discussion about...
We have terrible health outcomes.
I was just listening a moment ago to the fact that because of our economic system, we are driving innovation, or at least
we drive innovation towards solutions that are therapies that are long-term therapies, and we invest in that because that's an economic model for growing a market, right? So in this country, because we live quarter to quarter, we have to keep driving markets and expanding markets, and that's the way that we talk.
So just to get the terminology down, you said we do fund therapies.
We fund therapies.
And what did China come up with? Was
curative.
That's curative. That's not a therapy?
It's not a therapy. Well, it's a one-time shot therapy.
How would Bayer distinguish between a one-shot therapy and a...
it's a therapeutic, but I think the issue is trying to figure out what's the right economic model that's going to support a one-shot therapy on the one side, affordability on the other side.
What's the answer?
I'll say that there is no answer, because I think that right now the innovation models don't support a one-and-done type of therapy, right? So,
is it because they're too expensive? Maybe the issue is the scientists. Maybe we should blame it on the scientists for not coming up with good enough solutions.
Because that's not the goal. The scientists did their job.
No, but let's say the scientists could... so is the issue on this... If we want to point the finger to the scientists, is the issue that they're charging us too damn much to solve these world problems?
Okay, so it's like rather than finger pointing. No. Instead of finger pointing, it's like instead of finger pointing, I think really the exercise should be creativity. How do we come up with alternative financing?
It's like everybody gets a prize.
No, it's not at all.
It's like, is there a better way of doing things than what's been done before?
Constructive as opposed to destructive.
Exactly.
But in order to so the goal is construct something that outshadows the existing system, because you can't break down the system. You've got to create a better solution. That's why I said it's a financial. Hold on, we're not done. We're not done yet. We have to find a better financial model to support these curative therapies. And we appreciate, Imran, you coming on to talk to us about this.
We'll have to reconvene this.
All right, that's fair.
There could be a part 2 of this argument. Yes. I mean, of this podcast.
This is good. Okay. This is good.
Okay, so we have to bring this to a close. Mark, your turn. Bring it to a close.
Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome.
Awesome.
Short and sweet.
That's fun.
It's rare.